Elowen Ashworth kept her head down for a reason. 3 years working in the healing house of the Blackthorn pack had taught her that silence was the safest kind of armor. Bandages did not ask questions. Herbs did not laugh at old scars. People, on the other hand, could not be trusted with either. She had come to Blackthorn territory with nothing but a bag of dried roots and a name nobody recognized. Her grandmother had raised her in a small cabin at the edge of the northern woods, far from packs and politics, teaching her the old ways of healing that most people had forgotten. When her grandmother passed, Elowen had nowhere else to go. The Blackthorn healing house needed hands, and she needed a roof. It was a fair trade, or so she told herself, on the nights she missed home the most. King Ronan Blackthorn was not part of that trade. He was simply unavoidable. He was the kind of man who filled a room before he even said a word, tall and broad-shouldered, with the restless energy of someone who had never once in his life needed to ask permission. He ruled the largest pack in the region, and he ruled it the way he did everything else, loudly, carelessly, and without much patience for people who did not amuse him. Elowen did not amuse him, not at first. He came into the healing house one evening, carried by 2 guards, his shoulder torn open from a border skirmish with a rival pack. The wound was deep and ugly, and the older healers were busy with other soldiers, so the task fell to Elowen. "The quiet one," Ronan said, wincing as she cleaned the wound. His voice was rough with pain, but he still managed to sound amused. "They send me the quiet one. Do you even speak, girl?" Elowen did not answer. She poured a mixture of crushed yarrow and honey over the wound, and pressed a clean cloth against it, firmer than was strictly necessary. He hissed sharply. "Careful. Careful," she said softly, "is a courtesy for those who ask for it politely." For a moment, he stared at her, clearly startled that the silent healer had a voice at all, let alone one sharp enough to match his own. Then he laughed, a short, surprised bark of a sound, and winced again because laughing hurt his shoulder. "Ghost has teeth," he said, as if delighted by the discovery. The nickname stuck. By the next morning, the entire pack had heard some version of the story, each retelling a little more exaggerated than the last. The king, laid low by an enemy claw, had been mocked by his own timid healer. Soldiers grinned about it in the training yard. Even the older healers smiled when they thought Elowen was not looking. She did not find it funny. She found it exhausting. She had spent years making herself invisible, and now, because of one careless sentence, she was the punchline of a joke that refused to fade. Still, she kept treating him. There was no one else whose hands stayed steady enough around a temper like his, and pride was a poor reason to let a king's wound turn bad. Every few days he would appear at the healing house, usually with some new bruise or cut from training, sometimes with no injury at all, simply talking his way past the guards so he could sit and provoke her while she worked. "You could smile once," he told her one afternoon, watching her grind herbs with more focus than the task truly required. "It would not kill you." "Neither will silence," she replied, not looking up. He laughed again. It was becoming a habit of his, laughing around her, though she could not always tell if it was mockery or something else entirely. She told herself it did not matter. Kings amused themselves with whatever was nearby, and she happened to be nearby often. What neither of them knew was that Elowen's bloodline ran deeper than anyone in Blackthorn territory understood. Her grandmother's family traced back long before crowns and pack borders existed, back to a time when wolves did not wear human faces at all. The old stories, the ones told only in quiet cabins far from cities, spoke of a first bloodline, wolves so old and so pure that their presence alone could stir something buried in other wolves, waking parts of them that had gone still for generations. Elowen had grown up hearing these stories as bedtime tales, nothing more. She had no idea they were about her own family. She had no idea until the night everything changed. It happened 9 days after the border skirmish, when a strange fever swept through the soldiers who had fought that night. Most recovered within a day or two, but Ronan's fever refused to break. It climbed higher each night, until his body began to shift without his control, bones cracking halfway toward wolf form and then locking painfully in between, neither fully man nor fully wolf. The pack physician tried every remedy she knew, and eventually admitted, quietly and with real fear in her voice, that she had nothing left to offer. Elowen did not leave the room. She had seen her grandmother face impossible fevers before, deep in the woods, with nothing but roots and stubbornness. She was not about to walk away simply because a title made the patient more frightening. She placed both hands against his chest, right over the place where his body seemed to be fighting itself, and did the only thing she could think to do. She pushed warmth into him, the same way her grandmother used to coax life back into dying lambs on the coldest winter nights. Part medicine, part something she had never been able to name. His eyes opened. For a moment they were the deep brown she recognized, and then they turned a strange, ancient gold, and then black, and then gold again, cycling faster than any fever should allow. "Who are you?" he said, except the voice was not entirely his own. It came from somewhere far beneath the surface, somewhere old. Elowen's hands trembled, but she did not pull away. "I am the healer," she said carefully. "That is all I have ever been." "I know that, blood," the voice answered, and it was not really a question anymore. She did not understand what was happening, only that whatever lived beneath his usual temper and his usual jokes was awake now, and it was looking at her the way old things look at something they recognize from long before memory began. The shift in his body slowed, then steadied, then reversed entirely, his bones settling back into their human shape as the fever finally broke. By morning, he was simply asleep, breathing evenly for the first time in days. Elowen sat beside him until the sun came up, too tired and too unsettled to move, turning the moment over in her mind again and again, without finding an explanation that made sense. When Ronan woke, he did not remember every detail of the fever, but he remembered enough. He remembered a voice that was not entirely his own, recognizing something in her. He remembered warmth pressing through him like sunlight breaking through ice. And he remembered, more than anything, that the quiet healer had not run when every physician in his pack had already given up. He did not joke about it. For the first time since she had arrived in Blackthorn territory, he had nothing clever to say. "You stayed," he said instead, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. "Someone had to. Others didn't." Elowen busied herself with cleaning up the bandages scattered around the room, unwilling to meet his eyes. "I am the healer. It is my duty." "It was more than duty," he said. "I felt it." She did not have an answer for that, mostly because she did not fully understand it herself. She had spent her whole life believing her grandmother's stories were nothing more than comfort for a lonely child, tales meant to make an unusual upbringing feel a little more magical. She had never once considered that they might be literally true, or that she might be the reason a fever broke when nothing else could. Word of what happened that night spread through the pack differently than the old jokes had. There was no laughter in it this time. The soldiers who had once teased her for being mocked by their king now watched her with something closer to caution, unsure what exactly they had witnessed, only certain that it was not ordinary. Ronan changed as well, though slowly, and in ways that were easy to miss unless you were looking closely. He stopped calling her ghost. He stopped making jokes at her expense in front of the others. He started showing up at the healing house, even when he had no injury at all, offering thin excuses about checking on his soldiers, though everyone, including Elowen, understood exactly why he kept finding reasons to be there. "You are terrible at lying," she told him one afternoon, watching him inspect a bandage on his arm that did not need attention at all. "I have never needed to lie well," he said. "People usually just believe me because I am the king. I don't." He smiled at that, a real smile, not the careless smirk he usually wore around others. "I know. That is exactly why I keep coming back." Elowen found herself, against every instinct she had built over years of careful invisibility, looking forward to those visits. She told herself it was simply curiosity, or professional concern for a patient who insisted on interrupting his own recovery time and time again. She was not ready to call it anything else, not yet. It took months before either of them said anything closer to the truth. Ronan was not a man built for gentle confessions, and Elowen was not a woman used to being seen, let alone wanted. But slowly, in the space between his visits and her quiet replies, something steady began to grow, built not on jokes anymore, but on the simple fact that he trusted her with his weakest moments, and she had never once used that trust against him. One evening, as autumn settled over the territory and the healing house grew quiet with the changing season, Ronan finally said what he had been circling for weeks. "I mocked you," he said, staring at the herbs drying along the windowsill rather than at her. "When you first came here, I made you a joke because I did not know what else to do with someone who would not laugh along with me." Elowen kept her hands busy, tying a bundle of dried lavender. "I remember. I am sorry for it." She looked up then, surprised. Ronan Blackthorn was not a man known for apologies, and she suspected this was the first one he had given freely in a very long time. "You don't have to apologize," she said quietly. "I was not an easy person to know." "No," he agreed, "but you were worth knowing anyway." The words settled between them, simple and honest in a way neither of them had managed before. Elowen did not have a clever reply ready, which was rare enough that she nearly laughed at herself. "I don't know what I am," she admitted instead. "Whatever woke in you that night, whatever my grandmother's blood really is, I still do not fully understand it." "Then we will figure it out together," Ronan said, slowly, "if that is what you want." For the first time since arriving in Blackthorn territory, Elowen did not feel the need to keep her head down. She looked at him fully, at the king who had once turned her into a joke and had since become the only person who truly saw her, and found that she was no longer afraid of being seen. "I would like that," she said. Outside, the last light of autumn spread gold across the training yard, where soldiers had once laughed at her expense. Inside the healing house, surrounded by drying herbs and quiet understanding, the healer who had never wanted attention finally allowed herself a small, steady smile, one that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with hope. The king who had once mocked her now sat beside her in comfortable silence, no longer needing jokes to fill the space between them. Whatever ancient blood had stirred that fevered night had settled now into something gentler, something lasting, built not on old legends, but on the simple, ordinary choice two people had made to stay. And for once, that was enough for both of them.